안녕하세요. Thank you. Hello. Thank you, Professor No, for your very kind words. Good afternoon. Just below the North Pole, on an island of pointed peaks and ice blue glaciers where you're more likely to encounter a polar bear than a human being, there's a special vault. And when you enter this vault, you literally enter inside a mountain. And walking through a long, dark tunnel, you reach a chamber 10 meters down into the bedrock. The walls, the ceilings are frozen. It's the permafrost, which naturally keeps the temperature at a few degrees below zero. Built to last centuries, earthquake, explosion, and flood-proof, it's virtually impenetrable. Actually, it almost makes you feel like you've walked into Superman's fortress of solitude. But in reality, you're inside the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. With a capacity to house 2.5 billion seeds, the Global Seed Vault maintains the world's greatest collection of crops. From Chinese rice to Californian sunflowers, almost every pocket of life on Earth is represented. The Republic of Korea alone has deposited nearly 9 million seeds, from the amaranth eaten by the Aztecs to the grains domesticated by our Mesopotamic ancestors. About 12,000 years of human history is lined up on these shelves. Protected in Svalbard, these seeds will keep humanity alive in the event of natural disasters or human catastrophes. Last year, and much earlier than anybody ever expected, a withdrawal was made from the Global Seed Vault for the first time. 128 boxes containing wheat, barley, and chickpeas sent from Aleppo, Syria, were extracted from the vault to be replanted in the Middle East. The reason for this withdrawal was not a flood or a drought, but collateral damage of war in Syria. And some of these seeds were no ordinary crops, but Neolithic wheats from the dawn of agriculture. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault has been called a food bank, the world's largest freezer, the agricultural hard drive, and even a modern day's Noah's Ark. I'd like to think of it as an archives. It has preservation standards, a strict access policy, controlled by what you'd call the Office of Record, and the content of its boxes has been selected for permanent preservation because of its intrinsic value. But perhaps most importantly to me, this repository embodies the essence of archives in today's globalized world. In our increasingly interconnected globe, a vault in the Arctic can become a life raft in a war fought thousands of kilometers away, and even the barren permafrost can be vital for the Fertile Crescent. But when a vault in the Arctic becomes an inspirational signal for peace and food security for the entire humanity, as the United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon put it, it's easy to see that any archive can help the world. In today's interconnected world, any archive, any archivist, anywhere, at any time, can tackle a global issue. Every day, you go out of the box and into the world. No matter if your archives contain crops, records, or traditional songs passed down from generation to generation, no matter if you work for national archives, small community archives, or the UN archives, no matter if you're based in a world's capital or in a small island nation, your archives, anywhere, at any time, may just contain a clue to a global issue. War and terrorism, climate change and the environment, human rights abuses and crime, hunger and poverty, the great challenges of today. And as ICA President David Fricker said, are fundamentally information management challenges. And in facing these challenges, you, archivists, are in the major leagues. As you preserve the past, you are at the same time protecting the present and the future. As you apprise records inside a box, you may discover a solution outside the box. As you develop finding aids, you may end up helping more persons than you initially thought possible. Your work connects past and future, problems to solutions, and people with people. Events such as this galvanizing 2016 ICA Congress here in Seoul help you connect. The challenges you are facing back home may be opportunities or problems solved for colleagues from other parts of the world. And this afternoon, they may be sitting just a couple of chairs away from you. This Congress is a wonderful opportunity to powerfully remind all of us how essential your day-to-day work is for the world, how your work truly embodies the spirit of the Universal Declaration on Archives to promote responsible citizenship, and how your work spreads far beyond your archives by going out of the box and into the world. I see every day the powerful impact, the powerful global impact that archives can have. For the last 20 years, I've worked with the United Nations courts that deal with the international crimes which shattered the former Yugoslavia in the early 1990s and which killed nearly 1 million people in 100 days in Rwanda. The archives of the tribunals contain the voices of the victims, describing rapes, killings, and other unspeakable crimes. They contain the pleas of the accused and the verdicts of the judges. I'd just like to give you a glimpse of our collection. in a sense, our archives are like a mosaic of horrors and devastation. But amidst the clothes exhumed from mass graves in Rwanda and the remains of a mortar from the shelling of Sarajevo, the Tribunal's archives also offer beacons for a brighter future. The archives can show us a path towards personal and collective reconciliation, be it through the stories of a witness who shares how she was able to forgive, the apology of an accused, or the analysis of the many symbols they contain. For instance, one of these symbols is cows. Approximately 13% of the testimonies at the Tribunal for Rwanda include some reference to cows. Always central in Rwandan culture as a symbol of wealth, cows served at some point to identify the targeted Tutsi minority with the genocidal consequences that followed. 75% of the transcripts in our archives, which include the word cow or cattle, also include the word kill in close proximity. And typically, the witnesses would recount a perpetrator raping or killing, and then killing and eating the cow of the victim. Cows could also be seen as a reward for killing of Tutsi men, women, and children. But when we look carefully, the same archives also tell us another story about cows in Rwanda. They also remind us that giving someone a cow was the ultimate sign of friendship in the Rwandan tradition, a symbol of love, faithfulness, and cooperation. And it is this story that now prevails in Rwanda. In 2006, the Rwandan government launched a program called Girinka, in English, May You Have a Cow, which gives cows to the poorest Rwandans, rejecting the notion that cows belong to a privileged few. And in 1994, when neighbours killed neighbours, today, with Girinka, the beneficiary of the cow offers the firstborn calf to a neighbour, a gesture that, in keeping with the tradition, seals a bond of friendship, and it helps to rebuild the fabric of society. So as archives can help reconciliation, they are also there to remind us and counter those who seek to rewrite history by preserving for posterity the integrity of eyewitness testimonies and judges' findings on the crimes committed in Rwanda and in the Balkans. And also, in consulting these archives, we can learn how and why atrocities happened, and in doing so, become more alert in detecting early signs and triggers of emerging crimes so that we can do more to help prevent them. Archives do not just document an inexorable past, they are a cherished heritage to build a more resilient future. And where atrocities could not be prevented or halted, our archives can assist the many courts around the world committed to delivering justice and ending impunity. I remember when I joined the Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia in the 1990s as a relatively young legal officer. International criminal law was still a new frontier. We had little case law to guide us, but today, courts prosecuting genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity can find in our archives a rich jurisprudence that may support them in their own work. At the tribunals, we work tirelessly to bring our archives out of the box and put them at the disposal of the world. And our new fully searchable database, JRAD, already includes some 30,000 entries and counting. JRAD has been assessed from all continents and from 7 of the 9 provinces in the Republic of Korea, and I hope by the end of this week it will be all 9. But do you have to be an archivist of a UN criminal court or of the global seed vault to help justice or to prevent hunger or to make any meaningful difference in the world? Of course not. You can help a person and a society from any archive, wherever it may be. For instance, you can help people retrieve what's most precious to them, their identity, and in doing so help an entire society right its wrongs and move from a visible past into an inclusive future. It's what many Australian archivists are doing. Your identity is what makes you who you are. It makes you you. Maybe it will be your language, perhaps the values you were taught as a child, your history, the clothes you wear or the food you eat. But imagine if your name, your family tree, your beliefs, and eventually your memories were taken from you. If your identity was erased, how would you feel? Who would you be? For well over half of the last century, thousands of Australian Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children were forcibly removed from their communities to be brought up in non-Indigenous foster families and institutions, and they became painfully known as the stolen generations. As the Australian people have embarked towards personal and collective healing, archives have been identified and are harnessed as an essential tool to reclaim identity and to help Australians along the journey to reconciliation. And where in the past records of forcibly removed children might have been destroyed to sever bonds with their communities, today they are preserved. And where some administrations might have tried to distort data, now Australian archivists work to maintain the integrity of all information. Church archives, registries of births, deaths and marriages, university libraries, first stop shops across the country are helping first Australians in the daunting task to locate, amidst myriad officers, any helpful information on their background and the cultures of their people. Efforts such as those of the National Archives of Australia in creating indexes and training Indigenous archivists all enable greater access to information by those who need it the most. They bring information out of the box and into the world. I see in the many archivists engaged in this inherently difficult challenge the efforts of my mother. At a time when women barristers were few and far between, she became the junior counsel who, together with Eddie Mabo, started a then inconceivable and perhaps pointless, regarded as inconceivable and highly unlikely legal battle. A decade of efforts later, the Mabo case would grant, for the first time, legal recognition of Indigenous people's rights. I found this photo on Google last night. Clearly it's from the early 1980s of my mother and Eddie Mabo up there on the left. Having the courage to look back and then the strength to look ahead is not easy for the service providers, and it's not easy for the service receivers. There is pain in finding the information, and there is pain in revealing that there is no information. Even with the best intentions, cultural clashes and setbacks are always around the corner. But remember, monumental changes in societies are often brought about by pushing through these difficulties. From a seed vault in the Arctic to repositories across Australia, any archive, any archivist can help tackle the problems of the world. With terrorist attacks striking from Nice to Dhaka and earthquakes razing villages from Italy to Nepal, we realise that we all share the same challenges. And be it explosions or tremors, solidarity immediately spreads out from all corners of the globe, People that never met before get connected through a donation, a message on a blog, or working together in the rebuilding efforts. This is the humanity that links us all, that breaks linguistic, religious, and geographical barriers, and that makes us go out of the box and open up to the world. Crisis can happen anywhere, anytime. That's where and when archivists like you play a really special role. But would you be ready to embrace the challenge? Imagine chaos erupting in your town. Your archives are at risk. Would you try to smuggle them out? Would you quietly and secretly pack them up? Would you hide them in the houses of your friends? But would you do so if this endangered their lives? Would you transport them in the heat and across water? Would you load some in your car, the car of your nephew? And what if militia blocked him at a checkpoint? Would you risk being arrested? Would you try to save your archives? There is a man, a collector, a librarian, and an archivist who said yes to each of these questions. Mr. Abdelkader Haidara, the guardian of the legendary Timbuktu manuscripts collection. Timbuktu enchanted the dreams of travellers and enlightened the minds of philosophers, astronomers, and poets across eons. In the spring of 2012, Timbuktu was sieged by rebels and extremists, and they subjected this essential centre of Islamic learning to a brutal 10-month occupation. I was fortunate to have had the chance to visit Timbuktu. And this is the footage I took from my armoured vehicle in June 2013, just a few weeks after the French intervention. The city was slowly beginning to live again. And this is one of the three mosques. Here's the Baba Centre for Documentation and Research, where Mr. Haidara works. And here you see the master artisan of the famous Timbuktu doors, who had reopened his workshop. But across town you could see piles of what looked like debris and rubble, construction material. To my astonishment, I was told that these were the famous Timbuktu mausoleums, or what remained of them after the siege. It was against this backdrop that Abdelkader Haidara acted. As he said, I could never have imagined such a thing happening, just a few months before. Everything collapsed overnight. And Mr. Haidara said, but it did happen, and he was ready to act. And when the assailants entered the town of Timbuktu, Mr. Haidara gathered a team, and he made a plan to save the manuscripts from plunder and destruction. And silently and in the dark, they packed, and little by little, trunks filled with manuscripts were carried by donkeys to family houses around the town. And as the situation worsened, they smuggled the manuscripts with couriers out of Timbuktu, by road and along the Niger River, past rebel checkpoints and alert troops. They faced multiple close calls, and once Mr. Haidara's nephew nearly had his hand chopped off in the public square. But nothing stopped them. This complex operation rescued 350,000 manuscripts, 90% of the entire Timbuktu collection, and they hid them in Mali's capital city, Bamako, which is about 1,000 kilometres away. Archivists, librarians, friends, relatives all came together in Timbuktu fighting to save their heritage, not just for their families or Timbuktu or Mali, but for humanity as a whole. These manuscripts of poetry, astronomy, medicine, human rights, and Islam belong to Timbuktu, but they also belong to all of us. And Mr. Hadira took them out of the box and he returned them to the world. And the world came in to help, and reinforcements arrived from far and wide. He had colleagues from Iraq and Afghanistan who gave him advice. UNESCO launched a Timbuktu manuscripts project under the Jikji Memory of the World program. And we all heard 2 weeks ago Mr. Al-Mahdi pleading guilty to the war crime of destruction of cultural heritage in Timbuktu. And you saw in the video the debris. I had lots of friends, lots of partners, people who gave me a lot of advice so that I never felt completely alone, said Hadara. And that's the humanity and the friendship that links all of us. From the exceptional friendships that extreme circumstances spark, to small everyday gestures, it's often friends and colleagues who push us to do more, who push us to face new challenges and help us tackle them. Congresses such as this are a unique and amazing opportunity to unveil how friendship and cooperation among archivists can bring greater harmony into the world, At the Mechanism for International Criminal Tribunals, my archivists are fostering friendships and organisational cooperation. In Arusha, Tanzania, we have built a centre of archival excellence, a repository of best practices, and increasingly a reference point for archivists in the region and beyond. Spearheaded by Tom Adami, we are vigorously supporting the ICA Africa program. We've shared our experiences in advanced digital preservation, archival repository management, and information security with archivists and civil servants of government bodies, educational institutions, and public agencies of Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Botswana, Ethiopia, Malawi, and Rwanda. We're also ready to give our support to developing e-court systems and in the preservation of audiovisual records. We've also constructed the first United Nations purpose-built archives. And it all started with my audiovisual archivist, Martha Hunt. Her few coloured cells on an Excel spreadsheet have now become brick and mortar, which we hope will inspire similar projects across the world. And our new home here sits atop this hill, and the premises are minimalistic, multi-purpose. The design, it revolves around the central tree, which symbolises justice in many parts of Africa, and the 3 buildings face onto the courtyard. The office building at the back, the courtroom with its conical shape, and the archives, the largest of the 3, with a 670 square metre repository. There's a processing room, cold vault, and here we have inside thick concrete walls, prevailing energy-efficient cooling systems working together to maintain steady environmental conditions. It's my hope that our premises will host the 2017 conference of the ICA section on international organisations as part of the advocacy arm of the Africa program. And alongside the physical archives, we're at the final phases of establishing a digital preservation system. It's designed to contain 3 petabytes of records, including nearly 100,000 hours of audiovisual recordings of our trials and appeals. This is the first project of its kind at the United Nations, and we passionately took up the challenge of meeting the stringent requirements of ISO 16363. And we're tirelessly working to join the few institutions worldwide which have already obtained certification. We're eager to put this experience at the service of other global archivists. And since the opening of the mechanism in 2012, we've given the opportunity to young students of archival science, many from Tanzania, to join us for a hands-on feel of what it means to be an archivist. From checking the temperature of the repository twice a day, to helping to respond to access requests, we have involved them deeply in our operations. And I commend the ICA for their emphasis on supporting youth and those new to the archival milieu. And I'd like to salute the new professionals who are here with us today, but I'm particularly proud that actually one of them, Timbuktu, is now a staff member. He's a new staff member of the mechanism. And he is joining a team of archivists whose unwavering will and dedication have proven their commitment to get out of the box and into the world. Archivists are the Leonardo da Vinci's of our time. Modern Renaissance men and women excelling in multiple disciplines. Your communications experts are activists, movie makers, IT wizards, and project managers. So cooperation and friendship amongst archivists is a very good start. But it is joining forces with experts outside the profession which will truly bring archives out of the box and into the world. And even unexpected partners and improbable leverages can lead to a breakthrough. Archival projects around the world are already finding this out. I'll give a couple of examples. For instance, the Singapore's Citizen Archivist Project is calling for everybody's help to make records of their national archives more discoverable. And when shared, the intensive burden of transcribing documents and audio recordings is lighter. And when harnessed, collective memory gathers metadata of undescribed photos faster. Another example, the New York Public Library. The New York Public Library has invited all to kill time, make history, through transcribing historical menus or digitally aligning antique maps with present-day locations. And it's worked, and even surpassed expectations. Transcribed seafood menus have helped marine biology research. And rectified maps have enabled earthquake aid workers in Haiti to save lives. The possibilities are endless when you bring the archives out of the box and into the world. After this long journey, let's come back to Seoul. In 1988, Seoul hosted the world's greatest athletes in the Summer Olympic Games. Today, it welcomes the world's leading archivists. And like the Olympics, every 4 years, the ICA Congress challenges its participants to set new trends, break barriers, and achieve what seemed unachievable. Like the Olympic athletes, you must now compete, but not with each other, but with yourselves, to be ever better guardians of the authenticity of your archives, ever better guides in a world of over-information, and ever better responders to the world's global issues. The thank yous of those you help, from Syria to Rwanda, and from Mali to Australia, will be the most precious gold medal you will ever receive. So thank you, President Sung Jin Lee of the National Archives of the Republic of Korea. Thank you for inviting us here from all corners of the world. Thank you, President David Fricker, for leading us, inspiring us to greater heights. And thank you all for bringing more harmony to the world through your work, from Seoul, out of the box, and into the world. Thank you very much.